That's all there is to it. This axle job wouldn't take more than, I don't know, 20 minutes, plus an alignment. Don't forget the alignment. Before you start lighting me up in the comments, yeah, I know, I have a lift. Not all of you guys are gonna have a lift. You're not gonna need one. Jack stands are fine, but it does make it easier if you have access to a lift, and will make it a whole lot faster. First step here is gonna be to remove this wheel. Taking a look underneath, this is the guy that came from the other guys, not a Subaru replacement axle. The boot's still in good shape. I had an extra CV joint just laying around. Might as well change it while I got all this other stuff out. Take a look at this axle I bought from Subaru. Notice it's still black. Boot's in good shape, but there's no surface rust on the shaft itself. That's just kind of an indicator to me. This one's probably of higher quality because they probably powder coated it. But it's in good shape as opposed to the rusty old thing on the other side over there. These little fellas are a 19. I recommend having a zzz, but if you don't, you can do this with a breaker bar, 4-way, even the tool that comes with the car. This little fella right here is a 32. With the axle nut out of the way, I'm gonna turn the steering wheel. Make sure your steering is free through this job. Makes it a whole lot easier when you can move this guy around. I put a couple of marks there with a silver pen. Fairly easy to see. Did it on both sides, just to make sure that both the nut and the bolt are covered. I don't know if that's necessary or not, but I did it anyways. That way I don't have to worry about it as much. You must get an alignment after this job is done. These are alignment bolts. Alignment, plan on it. Forgot to mention, these guys, they're a 19. Right here we can see the shape of this upper bolt, clearly an alignment bolt. The lower one, not as important, shaped pretty normally. I put the nut and the washer back on this top alignment bolt and the nut back on this bottom bolt just to make sure that I don't get confused when I put everything back together. Notice, upper bolt is on top. Lower bolt is on the bottom. Now that this whole thing is separated, this guy will just pull right out. Just a little bit of work, and we're all separate. Fantastic. A little finagling, a little taparoo of the hammer, and this guy's out and free. This is a little stuck, but it didn't take much. When you pull this inside section out, get ready. She gonna leak a lot of gear oil. So prepare yourself for that. Have gear oil on hand. Probably a good idea to bungee yourself up a little bit. Keep the pressure off this here brake line. I also put the lower bolt in there just to hold everything together. That'll keep the strut from moving around. But now, this thing's free and flexible. I'm gonna stick a pry bar up there and use a little pull to get this thing out because it's just a tad tight, but it's not bad. Just be careful that you don't damage anything while you're prying it out. You don't have to worry about the axle, but you have to worry about the case on the transmission, and it just slides right out. We're gonna demonstrate real quick why it's better to buy the Subaru parts. These things are about the same age, and this one's still in good shape, where when we pulled this one out, it separated at the end because it's just from the other guys. It's just not good stuff.
Working on the passenger side, we really need to get a seal puller, but we don't have one, so we just used a little pry bar and worked our way around, going a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, till it popped off. And this is the new one that they gave us. It's not the same, but it might work. We'll find out. Here's what we ended up with. The old seal, like we saw, was a little thicker. And I don't know if that prevents this from being pushed in too far, but you can push this in a little bit too far. You can push this in too far and then you don't have a groove in there, which is gonna be a necessary groove for oil. So this wants to be just perfectly flush with the outside. And I think this seal that we got is gonna work just fine. This operation is fairly simple. That end right there is gonna go into the transmission, and that end right there is gonna come the wheel. Insert this end first, then we will pull the hub out of the way and slide the axle in from the rear. This driver's side wheel is turned all the way to the right. That gives us the most room on the back side back here to stick that end in there. Do not forget to throw a little anti-seize in here. That will make your life easier if you ever have to change these again. Put a little bit either inside here or a little bit here on the threads. Take care here, inserting this shaft into the transmission. Go slow, take it easy. You don't want to rip this seal, make a mess of it, and then have your transmission leaking all over the place. Don't rush. Just like I said here, there's no rush on this. I just inserted just enough to make sure that I cleared that little rubber seal before I went any further. This prevents me from just jamming it in there too quickly. Now I can work on it. It's gonna take some pushes. I'm gonna have to wiggle and shake, jiggle and shake, and slide it in. A lot like this.
a little bit at a time. And if it's not going in, I'm gonna move out to the outside a little bit and use the outside of the axle shaft, create a little bit more leverage so I can slide it in. Make sure you're nice and seated in the center of the seal before you do any of that mess. The new axle was so tight here in the joint, there wasn't any room to compress. I went ahead and removed the caliper to give myself just an extra centimeter of space. No big deal to slap it on and slap it off real quick. And that way I had all the room I needed to get that guy in. It's just set into the hole right now. Now I'm gonna put some anti-seize on it, and I'll probably stick a little bit in on this end too, on these threads. I threw the caliper back on. These bolts are just seated, they're not tight. That way, this thing is just kind of helping keep everything together. It's also out of the way because this alignment, putting the strut back into the top of the hub assembly, can be a little bit tough. We want to get the bottom bolts in first and the top bolts go this way towards the front. Lightly jiggle and shake, lightly jiggle and shake. We'll get this axle seated in here, sort of. Lower bolts in, nuts on the other side, just holding it in so it doesn't fall out. Next step is the top bolt. Little anti-seize on our bolt here, just on the end that's smooth. That'll make taking it apart easy if we ever have to do this again. No big deal. You don't need to put it on the threads or anything, just a little bit, light little coat. Remember our alignment mark we made earlier? And over here on our strut, let's line those guys up real quick. This will get you at least safely to the alignment shop. And there it is, lined up right here on the top. Bottom one's not as important, but I'm gonna line them up anyways, just in case. 2 more things to go. Gonna pop on the axle nut, and then once we get the axle nut on, we're gonna punch in this lip. You can see it's already punched from when the old one was in there. We're gonna punch that lip in real quick into the little indentation on the axle, keep it from moving. Put this thing in by hand, used a breaker bar and this 32mm socket to snug it up, and then I used just a bit of a to get it nice and tight. Grab me a center punch, boom, punched in our little indentation. You can see the blue mark right there, that's the indentation. Boom, that's the punch on the nut. Job done. Just gotta take the bungee cord off.